feel better knowing that Jas exists in the world. Today he's going to share his latest obsession, which is observability within test frameworks. Jas.
Thanks, hello. Thanks, everyone. I'm Jas. I've been with Culturam for more than 2 years now, and I'm gonna share my journey in how I've landed up here with automation and with observability for the first half. In the second half, I'll talk about how you can go about it and implement it in your current place of work. So let's get into it right away. Before that, thanks for the sponsors. Go play the sponsor bingo. And I would like to start in one of the values, values from Culturam, one of my favorite one as well, which is to have the courage to be vulnerable. And I'm going to start at that point where I'll be sharing my first production incident, which 10 years ago, I started my career as an Android engineer. And right out of uni, I just got this break, very happy that I got that job, and I was really working towards building a mobile Android app for Android 5.0 or 4.4 and 5.0 at that time. And that's the main place which led to me becoming an automation engineer and also learning about testing and how you can go about it in large scale. So what happened was we redid the whole app. I was kind of like the only person working on the Android space, and I had like all these cool animations inside the app. But what happened was I got a message the day we released. There was no like PagerDuty or anything like it is currently. 10 years ago, we just had basically nothing. So what happened was people couldn't sign up because that's the first screen. Obviously, you need people to come and sign up. And it turns out that in the if statement, I added an exclamation mark somehow during the process. And instead of allowing people when you have the right details, it just ended up failing the validation. So it was quite a learning experience. And it was like the first time I was like, all right, maybe we need to do this properly. And I really wanted to learn about this. And I thought I would just share there. So at that time, Espresso was not as good as it is currently, and not many people were like across how to do like test automation across that big of scale. So it was a really good starting point for me to write, how do we do this properly? And that's where I started this journey. So I moved to a new company, and I had a lot of people to learn from. So the first thing that I started with was, all right, let's just have some sort of end-to-end tests, and let's make it run and build pipelines. So fairly straightforward. We had this build dashboard. It was a big TV in the office where you just like shows different projects and shows which build was green and which build was red. And it was very the first starting point. Like just have some sort of, first of all, have some sort of test, and then make it run in a build in a pipeline, and then just keep monitoring it. That way you don't have to like think about something when it's like broken or something. You just know it, and you can have that monitoring in place. And the next one was, again, like as I moved into different companies, I got to learn from different people. And the next set of things that I was able to learn was just moving away from end-to-end. There's other more component level testing that we could do, and that my test knowledge just diversified. And the one we went with was that particular app. We implemented screenshot testing. So during those times, like web had a lot of frameworks, but not mobile didn't have that many. So we had to build like our own screenshot or snapshot testing framework to do that. Like it would just like Chromatic does currently with web apps and stuff. At that point of time, what we did was take screenshot of your app in different states, in different components, and it would just throw out like screenshots that can map, and it would also like print it out in different languages. So you can also like validate them and stuff. So that was a really good experience. We had that. And in terms of monitoring, we went from just showing green and red in the big TVs to just reporting it more properly, because we were also like working in some key projects which had like financial institutions where you had to like have these reports and stuff. So we thought like you can pretty much like monitor at the end of each run, it would just prepare a report for you. It would call like the test trail API and push a report, and you can exactly see what happened in that report, and you can manage or monitor that automation or automated tests in there. So that was the next level. It was like graduating one level at a time. So that's how it felt at that point of time. So the next one, I joined Culture Amp, and one of the things that Anne-Marie introduced to me lately was, or when I joined in the beginning was, maybe let's start with contract testing in PAC, because we had a larger, like 25 teams across, and everyone else was calling everyone else, so it was very hard to like keep track of what's happening. Like discoverability was a big issue. At the same time, testing across boundaries was a big thing. So we started implementing PACT across the organization, and that was a great experience. But now the other challenge was the test was not in just one place. It was everywhere, because like one service was calling 3 other services, which meant that testing was kind of shared across different services. So you need to have some sort of monitoring or a way to kind of like understand how testing worked across these places. And that's where it left me in terms of like, all right, in the last 2 years, what I was able to do was, maybe because I was able to like be across observability just for the systems that we use, why can't we just use in tests? And a big driver of that was also like Abigail Bankser, who's been teaching about observability and a very big Kubernetes nerd as well. So I learned a lot from her, and took it and see how we could implement it in our current organization. So that's where observability for tests started. There's a really good course that she ran in Test Automation University as well, that you can go and check it out if you want to get started with that. But that was the starting point. So what that led to me was this kind of a setup. So this was the first block I was working on, which is when a test runs in a CI, and it would push this trace, and you can see that what's happening in each of the tests, and in one test, what are the different steps. So instead of just logging or printing logs in the console, you get this clean and beautiful trace that you can look at and see exactly what's happening without having to go into like code at all. You can just monitor this from a very high level. So that's when things started to work out, and this was not the only scenario that we were going with. So that was the journey which led to like exploring more about how you can like, first of all, write tests and manage tests, but at the same time, how can you use observability to help you with this kind of a scenario? So first, so you can use this observability in different layers. So what we'll do in the next 10 minutes is to go through how you can use this in various contexts. The first one is like a build level observability, which is when you can use build kite or whatever pipeline system that you have, but you can add just a library. For example, if you want to use Honeycomb, every tool has its own libraries. Honeycomb has something called build events. So as soon as you add build events to your pipeline, what it would do is it would push whatever is happening in your pipeline to build kite, and you can go and monitor this throughout. So you can see that this is a sample of like what I had previously. You can see that different types of tests are running, how long it took. One of the things that everyone is also striving to is to have that build time between 10 minutes. It's like the good sweet spot that everyone's trying to achieve. So you can also see where most of your time is taking, how you can parallelize it. So this was a really good way to kind of like take the next level and do as minimal as possible, but just explore with how you can go about introducing observability in your test automation. So that's part one of it. And the second one is tool level observability. So lately what has happened is every tool seems to have introduced their new own like observability or like trace view. So for example, if I show you this example. So this is just an example of a playwright test running. And if you, in last year, late last year, I think, they introduced this new feature called trace view. So what you can do is you can have like different test steps being recorded automatically for you without having to go into the test code and look at it. You can pretty much just have that trace view here, and you can pretty much see what happened when and where it failed, and you can have all the screenshots and everything in place here. This is not the only tool that provides you. So there's a few tools that's been allowing you to make this kind of a view, so you can have an exact view of what's happened in your tests without having to go into tests at all. So the next one is the test level observability. So the first we saw was just build. The next one was what you can get from a tool automatically. But this one goes a bit deeper and allows you to give you, create your own logs and create your own traces, and helps you explain how the test has been constructed. So this is the screenshot that I showed you a little bit earlier, but what happens here is, you can see that the test is running. Once the test is completed, so for example, this is the test, it's running. As soon as the test is completed, it pushes the trace to Honeycomb, and it's the exact same screenshot I shared earlier. But you can see that in here, it covers what happened in each of the, in one test. So this is just one test, and you can see that first it was setting up test data, next it was calling this particular page or test, and you can see that what happened in that whole test. So what you can do is, instead of just printing logs on your console, as I said earlier, you can instead push it to your observability tool, and it would take care of all that. So you can, one good thing is also you can add as much as data you want here. So for example, in here, you can see that what test data was even passed here. So in that setting up test data, you can say that the message that was actually sent as part of that was something else, the name was that, and the what was the event. So you can send like all sorts of data to it because it's customizable, and you're just calling it from your own context. So yeah, so this is that. This is the level 3 where you're doing it from that test level. All right. So the next two levels are more around monitoring and management. So for example, like now you've got all the tests in your pipeline. Everything is coming through to your observability tool. And what you can see is that some of the observability tools has given you this kind of a view where you can see exactly what branches were running, and has there been any specific test that has been flaky for you. And you can also see how long it took for it, and you can kind of like manage that kind of a test case monitoring and test case management here. So this has been really helpful. A lot of people have used this and said that, okay, we've identified some flaky tests and we've fixed it, and it has helped us have a very clean pipeline. So this is the next level of like test monitoring that you can have. And the last one is the one I was actually trying to use observability for, because we were in a platform team like called Quality Foundations, which was helping a lot of different teams build tooling and enhance their test automation. So what we were able to see is, because say for example, if you're using Pact and 3 other teams are calling your APIs, so they're also doing part of your testing with consuming your APIs. You're doing the testing from a provider point of view. So there's a lot of scenarios covered in a lot of places. So instead of being redundant, what you can do is you can see how things are being tested across the organization for that one particular feature. So for example, you can pass in a particular value saying epic of initiative, and you can then say, okay, if for this particular epic, what are the tests have been happening in different services? So you can then have a look at, all right, this is how everyone's been testing my epic, so you have that kind of coverage and everything. So instead of just providing you like a test level coverage, you get like an organization level coverage to say, at any point of time, if someone asks you for this feature, say for example, the sign up feature, how many tests have been running, how are you actually tracking your tests, you can just go here and look at it, and you can have that kind of a tracking and test management here. Because one thing that I've noticed is that you can't just keep having like a list of tests that you run all the time. Tests keep getting added every time, so it's hard to kind of manage like a repository of tests. Say for example, what's the difference between this and TestRail when we were using it is that with TestRail we had like 20 test cases that runs every time, but you can't anticipate that. People keep adding test cases every day sometimes, so it's hard to like keep that in sync. So instead of doing that, you can do the reverse. You can go and reverse engineer it and say, all right, these are all my tests, I'm tagging it properly, I've got it by branches, I've got it by features, I've got it by epics. So it helps you like to look at it properly and manage it properly. So this is, again, just to recap, what we have is we can see that we've introduced observability in different levels, starting from build to test to a tool, and we can also use it for monitoring and also for management. So it doesn't have to be, you don't have to like use it everywhere. You can pick your own place and say, all right, this is where I think it will add value for my team. You can pick that particular space and see how you can make it useful for yourself. You can try it for everywhere, but it's up to you to see how you can get the most out of it. So you have all that data. That data is not helpful to you if you don't ask the right questions. So that's the key thing that you have to learn from any observability tool, not just for test automation, even for your systems. You need to be able to ask the right question to say, to make the best use of it. So let's go through some of the questions that you can potentially ask when you have this in your system. So you can say, all right, how has the test performed over time? For example, if there's like one test that's like very important, and you can see that, all right, this has been passing for a long time, but as soon as this feature went in, it become flaky. So you can track that over time. You can have that like graphs and see where exactly things went wrong. So that's one of the main questions that you can ask. And for example, the other one is like, how are some of the other services testing your feature? Say, for example, you have like one provider API, and you have 3 clients calling this API. So you can see how they are writing tests for your API, and you can also see how you're writing tests for your own. And you can like kind of see how people are using your API and like how they're testing it, and see how that coverage is spread across. This one, for example, you have like a sign-up feature, for example, what I spoke about earlier. And you can have an Android app and an iOS app using the sign-up functionality. And you can see that that's calling a particular API called a sign-up API. So you can track what's happening on a scenario basis. As long as you have the right tags in your test, it can just bring it up and show you how the things are being tested across different services and different apps. And this is my favorite one because we use K6 for, I personally use this a lot to do my load testing, is to use K6 for load testing. And when you do this testing, what happens is you run it for, say, 20 minutes with a high load. You need to know how that is actually affecting the performance of your system. So what you can do is, say this is observability using the Grafana tool. And what you can do is, all right, these are my tests, and this is how my system is performing. So at this particular time, your error rate went up, say, for example. You can track it with the exact same timeline to say how are other things are being like used. So once you bring your tests and your services together, you can exactly see what's happening across, and you should be able to debug things very easily. So that's been one of my favorite things to test is how your platform behaves when you're being load tested, and you can bring those 2 things together and exactly debug at the same time. So you exactly see where the threshold is, how many scaling has happened in your services. Is that something that you need to tweak with your auto scaling methods? So those kind of things you can track here. And finally, if you like have to do like yearly compliance report for a SOC 2 and stuff, you can just point them to the reports that we already have. You have everything for the last year, like every test that you've run, and you can just export it or just like give proper access to them to say, here are all the tests that's been happening, and no one has to like create spreadsheets. I know that's one of Anne-Marie's favorite things to do while SOC 2 compliance stuff comes up, is to keep asking people about how this is going. So that's one thing, again, it's off your list. So the best thing about it is that at any given point of time, you can go and like look behind and say like how things have tracked and what's happened. But one last disclaimer that I wanted to put through is also like data. You're just sending lots and lots of data, so which also means there's cost associated with it. Like you've seen Datadog's share price, and you can see why they are that high. So I'm sure you have like people looking after your pricing stuff. So make sure that when you add these solutions, the first thing before you start is to go and think how this is going to affect. So just having a rough estimation of if you run like these many tests for one branch, you can just make that calculation and try to be a bit more smart about it, especially when you're running like K6 tests. You're just going to generate so much amount of data, both from a services and a test level. So please have that in mind all the time. I feel like lately it's just been the problem of one person, like the director of SRE or something. Everyone else don't cares about price. So these are all good things, but just make sure you pick the right thing that adds value rather than just pushing everything to Datadog or to Honeycomb, wherever. So I just want you to think about this one question, which is, I just want you to go with this one question in mind, which is, if you can ask one question about your tests, what question will it be? So we've seen a few questions here. There we go. So I just want you to think about this. I'm curious to see how you would like to explore this particular learning. So if you're just going out of today's session, I just want you to think about just one thing. If you want to go and ask something about your own tests in your own team, what question would you ask? Because that's what is going to add a lot of value to you, and that's where it's going to provide that kind of a scenario for you. So it's going to help you a lot if you think about it that way and then go for solution rather than just implementing everything. So that's me. Thanks a lot. And yeah,
thank you, Jaz. Leave that up.